Hey everybody, Emma here, also known as eightvinyllow, bringing all of you another video. Today's video is going to be my Cincinnati vinyl record haul video. A couple of weeks ago, I ended up traveling to Cincinnati primarily to see Jeff Lynne's ELO. Now that has been a musical bucket list for me, seeing Jeff Lynne live, and this was really like truly now or never, right? With a lot of these bands and artists, it really is now or never. Jeff Lynne being one of them. The Stones I saw recently, who knows if they're going to tour again, right? You never know what's going to happen. But Jeff Lynne, that was huge for me, and so I made it a point to see him on this Over and Out tour, his final US tour, and so I traveled to Cincinnati to do that. That was actually the first time that I had ever been to Cincinnati, Ohio before, and I love exploring. I love going to new places, and one of the great things about exploring new places, or not great things because then you lose all your money, but one of the great things when you travel to a new place or you just travel in general, right, is exploring the local record stores. So I definitely did that. Not only did I explore the record stores, I also went to some really cool historical sites. I'm a big history nerd. I teach history, and so that was really cool as well. I also loved craft beer, and so I had to stop at Rheingeist Brewing, which if you're huge on craft beer as well, you've heard of before. That was so cool as well. But the highlight for me, outside of the show and a cool other little stops here and there, of course, was exploring the different record stores. So I went to 3 different record stores on that trip. That Friday that I drove in, I drove immediately to Loveland, Ohio, which is about 20 minutes northeast outside of Cincinnati, and I went to Plaid Room Records. That was like number 1 on my list to hit on this trip. That was the first place that I went. So I went to Plaid Room Records, home of Coal Mine Records, and I actually had the unique opportunity to meet and talk with the owner, Terry Cole, who couldn't have been kinder. He showed me around the record store a little bit and a couple of other things. We had some really great discussions. So Terry's awesome. I know that he's not watching, but he was an awesome guy, very, very nice and generous also with his time. And he was actually the one that suggested the 2 other record stores in Cincinnati that I ended up going to the next day. But again, the first stop, Plaid Room Records. Now, I knew that when I went there, right, I had to get something coal mine related. It's the home of Coal Mine Records. And so I ended up picking up one coal mine release. This is the Gabbard Brothers. Now, 2 major bands that I really, really love out of the Coal Mine label. First one, GA20. Second one, the Gabbard Brothers. I first listened to this album maybe about 3 or 4 months ago now. It was a recommendation from someone. I listened to it and I really enjoyed it. So when I saw this record at Coal Mine, I was like, absolutely, I'm going to grab this. So this is their self-titled release from 2022, the Gabbard Brothers, made up of course, the brothers of Andy and Zach Gabbard, originally of the band out of Ohio called the Buffalo Killers. So they were incredible. This album is amazing, but it is this Coal Mine exclusive splattered vinyl there out of 700. So if you're into this, and it says on the hype sticker, this hype sticker is great. It says if you're into this hazy, organic, and earthy psych rock sound, you would really love this album. The other thing that I have to say now, if you're a huge Coal Mine person, you know this already, but if you don't know a lot about them, here's my number 1 compliment for this label, outside of putting out incredible music and highlighting artists and bands that should be highlighted. Their packaging is amazing. The sleeve quality is amazing. It comes in this rice paper inner here, so you don't have to mess with those wobbly paper inserts and sleeves. I mean, I have nothing but great things to say about Coal Mine. This is on that Karma Chief label, which is a division of Coal Mine Records. And again, right, being at the home of Coal Mine Records, having talked with Terry Cole, I had to pick this record up. So I grabbed that. I also saw, as I was digging through the bins a little bit, BLIT, Split single. This is their debut album from 2014 called Fragmented World. Now, I was first introduced to Split Single by legendary Jim. He sent me one of their releases called Amplificado, I believe it is. And the main reason I think he sent it, outside of it just being a really great band, is it has this connection with Jason Narducy. Now, I'm a huge Jason Narducy girl. I know I've talked about him on this channel. The main connection for me where I was first introduced to Jason Narducy is that he plays bass for the Bob Mould band, and you guys know that I love Bob Mould. But he's been part of so many different musical projects over the last 20, 30 years. He's really, look him up. His resume is incredible in terms of the music world. But this is a project that he started, I think, back in maybe 2012 or so, a couple of years before they released this first album. Great kind of indie rock, alternative rock. There are hints of power pop, and I know I'm being a power pop girl, but there really are. This is a really catchy album. It has those hooks, it has those riffs that you love. This is also a kind of like indie rock supergroup in a way, because it has members of Superchunk in there, the Mountain Goats, Spoon. And so this was a great release. I was excited to see this in the new arrivals bin because I had not seen this in person before. So I think I'm missing one more or two more split singles. Speaking of Jason Narducy, I can't think of the band name now off the top of my head, but he just reunited with his childhood band. Starts with a V. I know somebody, you in the comments, go put it down below. And so there was like a whole big reunion at Riot Fest in Chicago, so that's been really cool to see. I love seeing the success from Jason Narducy. So Split Single, Fragmented World, great stuff. All right, speaking about power pop, I dropped the name, right? We are getting into Teenage Fan Club Bandwagon-esque, 1991. An extremely important power pop album, part of that 90s revival. This is an album that I've wanted in the collection for the last handful of months, and I kept kind of putting it off. I was like, well, I could order it online, but I want to see it at a record store, and I saw this at Plaid Records, so I ended up picking this up. Now, a couple of fun facts I want to throw in here. First off, you have this little money bag on the front cover. What I learned doing a little more research into this is that Gene Simmons of Kiss, he's the money bag guy. He thinks he owns a bag with a money sign on it for what Gene Simmons thinks he owns everything. Anyway, he apparently, when this was released, he ended up writing Geffen Records, and writing them a letter or something, and then ended up, supposedly he says, right, ended up getting a check from them because of this cover design. So what a dick. Anyway, outside of that, this is a fantastic album. I love Teenage Fan Club. The hit songs off of here, my favorite song off of here is What You Do to Me, but The Concept was another huge hit off this album. They also, you can hear, right, in a lot of those 90s power pop revival bands, you hear those influences. Like, I'm thinking of the Posies right now, you hear the influences of Big Star on those bands, and this one definitely has that Alex Chilton, Chris Bell sound to it, so much to the point that people jokingly call this album Big Star's Fourth, because it sounds so much like Big Star. I can hear elements of that. I don't think it is that reminiscent. I mean, there's obviously influence there, but that's another just kind of fun story with that. So 1991, Teenage Fan Club, bandwagon-esque. Love this album. Speaking of Big Star and Alex Chilton, the final record that I picked up at Plaid Records was this kind of unique little guy here. This is called The Death of Rock, Peter Holsapple versus Alex Chilton. So Alex Chilton, of course, of Big Star, and then Peter Holsapple, if you've heard that name before, again, another guy that's been involved in various different music projects over the last 20 or 30 years or so, if not longer, 40 years. Now, see, I'm even starting to get my dates wrong. Peter Holsapple, he's most well known for being part of the great power pop band, the DBs. So I saw this there, and I wasn't too familiar with what this was, but I think it was like $10, and I was very kind of curious about this. It says on the hype sticker, for the curious and the completists, Alex Chilton, while recording Like Flies on Sherbert, shows Peter's Holsapple how it's done at Sam Phillips recording service in Memphis. So this was released in 2018. The recordings on this album were from 1978 out of Sam Phillips Recording Service in Memphis, Tennessee, and has a really unique backstory to it. Now, I'm huge on the DBs right now. They have become one of my favorite bands. I met Chris Stamey as part of the Big Star Quintet this summer. I'm actually seeing the DBs in a few days at Milwaukee. I'm catching that show there, so I'm so excited to see them live. But really unique story about how this came to be. So, and I'll try to kind of give you the Cliff Notes version of this. Basically, Peter Holsapple, huge fan of Big Star and Alex Chilton, so much that he ends up moving to Memphis to go on this kind of like Big Star pilgrimage, so to say, and get that influence, because he loved that power pop sound, that proto power pop sound, and wanted to record that and really take influence in his writing and musical writing and things like that. And Chris Stamey, who will eventually be a band member in what would later evolve into the DBs, introduced Peter Holsapple to Alex Chilton. And it's basically, long story short, it's one of those unfortunate stories of the don't meet your idols because they become dicks type, or they're dicks. They don't become dicks, they are dicks. And so Alex Chilton was not nice to Peter Holsapple whatsoever, which Alex Chilton in general kind of has that weird history. But it was the don't meet your idol type situation. I think there was even a point where Peter was recording stuff, like he was recording in that studio. An early recording of the DB's Bad Reputation's actually on here, which is really cool to kind of hear that evolution. But he was recording here, and apparently Alex Chilton came up to him at a bar or something, maybe a few weeks later, and told him that it sucked. And so they ended up doing a session at the Sam Phillips recording and this is where the hype sticker goes and the whole story kind of wraps up, where Alex Chilton was trying to show Peter Holsapple how it was done. Because this was also the time period you have to keep in mind that Alex Chilton was really moving away from that power pop Big Star sound. And so he wasn't embracing that really anymore. And so you had Peter Holsapple, who was trying to be that and take influence from that. And then you had the guy that he was taking influence from shutting that all down. So really fascinating story. I'm missing a huge chunk of that. So definitely read up on this release and also that relationship between Peter Holsapple and Alex Chilton. It is definitely a fascinating thing. One of those little music nerd things in me that I love. All right, so that wraps up my Plaid Room Records pickups. Now we are going to move on to, so after Plaid Room, I went to go see Jeff Lynne's ELO, which was great. And then the next day was kind of more so downtown Cincinnati exploration. So record stores, historical sites, breweries, all of that fun stuff. The first store that I went to was the most known record store in Cincinnati, and it was definitely my favorite. It's one of my favorite record stores I've ever been to, period. The setup, the selection was incredible. And it's funny though, that is actually the place where I picked up the least amount of records. Knowing that I was going to another record store, having spent money at Plaid Room, the concert, the travel, all of those things, I had to be very conservative with my money, as we do, us public school teachers. So I only picked up 2 at Shake It, but it was my favorite store out of the 3 stores and one of my favorite record stores that I've ever been to. So being on this huge ELO kick, I've been wanting to build up my ELO collection. I had a couple of albums already, but I wanted to fill in those gaps. And so at Shake It Records, I picked up the first 2 ELO releases. Now this is their debut album from 1972, The Electric Light Orchestra. Now, the name of this album, of course, is No Answer, and that in and of itself has a really unique story on how that title came to be. I'm not going to get into it in this video. Look it up if you're interested, but I love this album. And then I also picked up their second album from 1973, which is Electric Light Orchestra 2, or if you're out of the UK, I think they called it ELO 2. So I picked up their first 2 releases. Now, this is not your Jeff Lynne pop sphere, poppy Strange Magic, Showdown, Mr. Blue Sky, ELO. This is your very proggy ELO. They're really digging into this progressive rock genre and experimental genre as well. Now this album's definitely experimental. This one is too, but these are two ELO proggy albums. So if you haven't heard these albums and you see them in a store and you're thinking that you're getting turned to stone on here, not even close. I dig it though. I love the poppy ELO too, but I dig this progressive rock stuff. Particularly this first album, so freaking good. I'm gonna get the number wrong if I don't. You guys know what I'm 10538 Overture. Did I say it right? Look at me go. I always get the numbers wrong. I don't know what that is. I don't know why I do that. I mean, my brain. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going. Okay, so 10538 Overture is one of my favorite ELO songs. It's one of my favorite releases. I love it so much. They actually played that at the show, and I was like almost in tears because I love that song. It holds such a special place in my heart. And it also reminds me of Downed by Cheap Trick. So that might be part of it too. And if you know, you know. But they played that song. It has some other great songs on here. Look at Me Now is a wonderful Roy Wood composition. So I love Roy Wood. I love Jeff Lynne, Bev Bevan, right? This first album definitely does it for me, so I'm a huge fan of this. And then, like I said, I picked up the second one. I don't love this one as much. There are some good songs on there. This is really proggy. I think there's only like 6 songs on this entire album, so that tells you that it's definitely proggy. But it has that 8-minute rendition of Roll Over Beethoven that is extremely popular. Outside of that, I can take it or leave it with this album, but I think this was like $6 or $7, and I wanted it in the ELO collection, so grabbed that. So that was it for Shake It Records. Again, I was a huge fan of that store. The downstairs was so cool. It had a lot of like their jazz selections and dollar bin selections and things like that. They also had like on the other side of the downstairs, almost like a mini museum of like Ohio music. It was just so cool. So I highly recommend if you're ever in the area to check out Shake It Records. The last store that I went to go visit was Everybody's Records, which I ended up with 4 pickups from there. I had been looking for this album as well. Now, the 2 ELO releases that I really, really wanted that I didn't have already were Time and then that No Answer, their debut album. At Everybody's Records, I found a really clean copy for a great price of their 80s release, Time. Now, I have such a soft spot for this record. This also definitely is kind of a later stylistic shift for the band. They go very like synthy on this. It comes out in 1981. It is very synthesizer based, which again is kind of serves as that stylistic shift for them, moving away from the 70s into the 80s. Not kind of calling America. Anyway, so I love this album. A song that they played on opening night of the tour from this album is Twilight, and I was really hoping they were going to play Twilight at the show that I went to. Unfortunately, they didn't, but I did end up picking up the record. The hit song off of here, I think Hold On Tight is on here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Hold On Tight is on here, which is the hit song off of this album. People either love or hate this album or love it and think it's not really that great. I really like it. It has a soft spot for me. It's on that Jet record label there, so definitely happy to have this in the collection. All right, kind of moving backwards a little bit, 1970. Now, this isn't Jeff Lynne, but this is Roy Wood. Jeff Lynne is not part of this band yet when this album comes out, but we do have a Roy Wood connection here, and that is The Moves Shazam. Came out in 1970. Now, even before I really started to dig into Jeff Lynne and outside of knowing hit ELO songs, exploring ELO, which I really have been the last few months, even before all of that, I have been for the last 4 or 5 years a huge fan of The Move. I love Roy Wood, which is that big connection for me, but I'm a huge fan of The Move. I have their debut album, I have Looking On, and I have Message from the Country, and those two albums include Jeff Lynne. The one album that I didn't have in the collection until finally right now is their second album, Shazam, which is probably their most well-known. This cover art is one of my favorite cover art albums, drawings, illustrations of all time. I love that. Look at how cool that. I love the comic book stuff like this. Cheap Trick's Rockford has a really cool cover. The Groundhogs, Who Will Save the World, The Mighty Groundhogs. I love that comic book cover. I love that sort of stuff. So this is a great album by The Move. Again, this is pre-Jeff Lynne. Jeff Lynne comes next with Looking On and Message from the Country, but a great release by this band. It's definitely that shift between their very, very bright poppy debut album, psychedelic pop album, into slightly a little bit more progressive. So I love The Move. I'm happy to add this into the collection. Super clean copy. Now this is a reissue, but very, very clean, and happy to have that. All right, since I'm in Ohio, I had to pick up another Ohio-based band, and of course I had to tie that into my love of power pop. Surprisingly, as much as I love power pop, I didn't already have this album, but being in Ohio, what a perfect place to pick this up. Great Ohio-based band. This is Fresh by the Raspberries. I always like to call it Fresh Raspberries. I think that's the whole point, right? Anyway, Fresh by the Raspberries. This is definitely their most well-known release. Fantastic band. I love that. Look at that cover. Then look at that back cover. Look at these guys. I don't even know what they're doing there. Anyway, so I don't know why I just realized that. Now I'm like shook. Okay. I Want to Be With You, Eric Carmen, right? Beautiful job on that. Going Nowhere Tonight. Let's Pretend. I Reach for the Light. It seems so easy if you change your mind. And no, not the sugar version. But had to add Fresh Raspberries in the collection while I was in Ohio, and just to keep building up my power pop, feeding that power pop addiction that I have. Perfect addition. And last but not least, at Everybody's Records, this is the final record that I'm going to show in this haul. I was excited to find this. This was like $3 or $4, which it was super clean, and there's not much on here besides a little scuff on top. So definitely the cheapest I've ever seen this record, and that is the Bongos. This is their release, or EP, Numbers with Wings. So the Bongos is a band based out of Hoboken, New Jersey. They're actually a power pop-ish band. They're also, once they got into the 80s, right, very new wave. But I first heard of the Bongos not too long ago, about 7 or 8 months ago. I went to go see Alejandro Escovedo, and playing in Alejandro's band and also opening for him is an individual named James Mastro. And so doing some research on him, I came across his work with this band, particularly this album. James Mastro has also done work with a lot of other different musical projects over the years, but this album came up, and as I researched more about it and this band, I'm like, I really dig this stuff. So this was on my want list for a while, and when I saw it at Everybody's Records for the price, I was like, I'm grabbing that. So this is definitely more new wavy than power pop. This is an EP, which is like the most commercially successful thing that they put out. The song Numbers with Wings, huge song, 1983 MTV. It was nominated for the first MTV Video Music Award, so it has that kind of cult following and connection. But great band, love James Mastro, and love this release. Another song that I really like off of here is off side 2, called Skydiving, but this is definitely a band that I would love to kind of learn more about. I don't think they have a lot of releases in their discography, maybe 2, maybe there was like 1 or 2 prior to this, then 1 after this. I don't exactly know. I know that this is their most commercially successful thing that they've put out, and I just like kind of all of those connections and backstories. This is a phenomenal EP that they released. So the Bongos, Number with Wings, grab that at Everybody's Records. So that is my Cincinnati vinyl haul video. I had a blast in Cincinnati, again, seeing the sights, exploring a new city, going to Rheingeist, exploring the record stores, going over to Loveland, Ohio, to Plaid Room Records, meeting Terry Cole, seeing ELO, it was just a phenomenal experience. But definitely stay tuned for that ELO concert recap video. I will be putting that hopefully out in the near future. That is all for this video, everybody. I hope that all of you are doing well, and I will see you all for my next video. Bye, guys.